Hello, hello. Heather Jean here with another episode of Confidence with Coffee. I'm not having coffee this evening because it is way too late for me to have caffeine. I will never sleep. So I am here talking about our latest podcast or vodcast episode. Uh, with this week, we are talking all about the nervous system and the physiology governing our behavior. So we're starting from the body and we're working into that mindset. And very often we start from the mindset and then go into the body. All of my programs start with a training session that happens during the week, live training and discussion and questions and answers and so on, and sharing. And then we go into a body movement class and we try and get out of that headspace. And in this conversation, we are starting from that place around our nervous system. I am joined by the fabulous Sara. I need to get this right. Sara Vatore. I always want to make it sound a little more Italian than it is actually pronounced. So I wanted to get that right for Sara. Sara is a fabulous podcast guest. I adore this conversation. Go and check it out on podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast is Confidence Through Cabaret, or you can check it out on the Vodcast playlist right here on the Confidence Through Cabaret YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe while you're here. Oh my goodness, there was so much to discuss in this episode. And we talked a lot about the breath. We talked about being able to calm ourselves down. We talked about being able to ample rev ourselves up. And we talked about that need to understand where our baseline is. And then from there, then be able to really kind of get into our body and understand what's governing our behavior. We also talked about the neuroplasticity of our body and how we always are learning. It's not a done deal once you're an adult and then that's it. It is actually something that is a constant journey. It's a practice. Let's have a look at the video that I've chosen to share from this episode. I had so many to choose from, so many clips to choose from, but let's have a look at this. This is Sara and I having a conversation.
Like another practice to be in to build in these embodiment patterns is just lying down on the ground with your hands behind your head and your elbows back and opening up this whole area and just breathing there. So even as I'm doing this, is not comfortable for me because this is something I'm still working on. So I can feel my heart rate start to increase a little bit and my breathing gets shallow because it's very open. There's a vulnerability to your neck. There's a vulnerability to your chest.
Yeah, there really is. And that's really counterintuitive to our survival.
Yes. Yeah. So it's something to play with. It's like power pose or, any of those kind of fun little imprints, but that is to work on the vagus nerve and to help feel comfortable sort of being open and out. And that's like, you can do it before, as you're going to bed, lie on the floor, lie in your bed and just stay open and see if you can breathe and notice if you get activated. If you get activated, that's great. Take your arms down, a little 3-1-5 breath, settle your nervous system. Then you can try it again.
Oh, that's fun. I'm to the end of that sentence, I'm going to do that. And I have immediately after that episode, I did do that. But there is that kind of, once we're open, our throat is open, our chest is open, our stomach and pelvis is open. And it is such a beautiful feeling. I'd highly recommend doing that activity. The breath that Sara is talking about there is in kind of being able to calm ourselves down. So when we want to calm ourselves down, we want to breathe out for longer than we're breathing in. So we might breathe in for the count of 3. We might hold it for, let's say, a count of 2, and then breathing out for a count of 5. And when we do that, it brings our body into a calmer state. So we talked about on this episode, kind of depression and the difficulty it can be to get out of bed some days. I know a lot of us experience that during COVID. Lots of us experience that more times than just during COVID, where we need to get ourselves moving and we need to get ourselves up and a lot more energy into the body. And so just any kind of movement, things like having a shower, going for a walk, and doing our breathing can really help us to kind of energize, which can get us moving and get us out of that state of being, a depressed state. And I don't mean this in a clinical depression way. I mean this as in a way of, really kind of getting our mind to get moving and be in the moment. We also talked about anxiety, and we talked about anxiety being that, very alert state where we're thinking and overthinking, and it can lead to physical, kind of shaking or kind of breathing in almost sporadic kind of ways. And we talked about that, ways that we calm down. So if you need to get a little more amped up or you need to be calming down, definitely you want to check out this episode. But one of my favorite things that we talked about in that kind of learning to, and you can, power pose is really, just kind of like being in that state of expansion in our space. And that really kind of helps us to be able to own our space, and really kind of helps us to kind of get that energy flowing, and in this state of, kind of spread, making ourselves vulnerable. It's a really beautiful feeling to just be open to it. But if that's something new to you, I mean, certainly this expansive state, and bear in mind, I have been a training consultant for decades. So I am used to running large conferences and speaking to very large audiences in a very motivational, energetic way. When I went into this expansion of myself in the cabaret world, that was very daunting, and it was something that took me a lot of practice. So, in that kind of vulnerable pose, it might take you some practice being comfortable with it. Also, for me, it's not always going to be comfortable. I can tell that now, although I'm feeling good with it today. It's like confidence. It's ups and downs, it's highs and lows, and it depends on what's coming for you in that day. But one of the things that we talked about in oh, so many things. One of the things that we talked about in this episode was really around kind of, having that harmony between, our thoughts and our body. And some of that comes from, ancestral patterns. And I do a lot of the ancestral work in terms of our mindset and our beliefs and our programming. My programming from my mother came from my mother's mother. And, she was around during the war and the depression. And then my mother was raised in the post-depression. So there was still a lot of that programming coming through. And then that's passed on and passed on. I was also raised in the space of, what a good girl does. And, I went to church with my grandmother, and I wore little gloves, and I sat nicely, and I smiled, and I said please and thank you. And I behaved the way I was told to behave. And that to some degree meant shrinking, because to be quiet rather than to take up space and be loud and be running around. And I think there is a certain amount of that, of, kind of learning when it's time to be listening, and when it's time to be talking, and when it's time to be playing, and when it's time to be resting. Um, but there is a lot of programming that comes ancestrally from the generations that went before us, and the traditions, the habits, the beliefs, the programming that gets passed down, and whether that's religious or geographical culture or any a variety of programming. There will be some programming in it. And I think, I certainly learned in terms of what I'm supposed to be like as a woman in business, as opposed to a man being in business. I'm not saying that that's true for everyone, but for me, that was a genuine experience about where was my place in it. And for example, used to work in the Middle East. I was the only woman who worked there, with amongst men and amongst Gulf nationals. I had a certain place that was quite different to the other expatriates, all of whom were men. So I had different things that were expected and different ways that I was entitled or allowed or expected to behave. And I understood what those were. But if that's how I then went on to living all parts of my life, and when I left the Gulf and moved back to Europe, then how I'm supposed to behave, how I'm supposed to behave, when I go home to my home in Canada, to my family, that triggers a lot of things that are how I'm supposed to behave there. And my nervous system knows habitually how I'm supposed to behave in certain environments. And what's happened with my confidence work is I've started to question a lot of that around who am I? Not who am I supposed to be, not who have I been told to be, or programmed, or rewarded to be, or punished to be, but actually who am I? What is it that I'm trying to express? Where do I want to step into my spotlight? How do I want to show up and be unapologetic for that? And that is a fundamental part of the work that we do in Confidence Through Cabaret. It's a huge part of, owning our stage, whatever your stage is, whether that's on a podcast or a Zoom call or a social media platform or an actual stage. It doesn't matter. When you show up, how do you want to show up? And really, that neuroplasticity that Sarah and I were talking about is really about, kind of forming your own habits that serve you, that allow you to be expansive, that allow you to show up where and when you are, what suits you, what's your passion, and be able to raise your voice and share your message unapologetically. Now, anytime that we give an explanation, that's a form of apology. A lot of it is fear based. And so, really, kind of doing that work both in our body to be able to calm or amp up our nervous system, and being able to calm and have the right kind of thought processes is a really fundamental part of confidence. If there's any assistance that you want with it, all of Sarah's details are in the show notes. All of my details are always Confidence Through Cabaret or Heather Jean. You can always reach out to me on Heather Jean on the socials. But we are Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials except for Twitter. We are at YBYWYS, and I am at Heather YBYWYS on Clubhouse. So please do reach out to me, like and subscribe while you're here, send comments, send questions, anything that you want to see. If you want to do workshops, I very often do, free masterclasses. ConfidenceThroughCabaret.com has a lot of pre-recorded masterclasses where you can work through that at your own pace as many times as you want to, with workbooks that are prompting thoughts for you to be able to explore for yourself at your own pace and in the subjects where it's most relevant for you in your personal life, work life, or stage life, whatever your stage is. So reach out to us. Those lovely, wonderful, fabulous letters that are in our Twitter handle and in my Clubhouse handle, YBYWYS, stand for It Is Your Body and It Is Your World. And it is your stage. Take up space and own it and enjoy it. I will see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye for now.